Hey guys, welcome back to Project Bodybuilding. In today's video, we're going to be comparing some of the best bodybuilders to never win the Mr. Olympia to see who comes out on top. Those guys, of course, are going to be Kai Greene and Kevin Levrone. Kai was a fan favorite in the 2010s, and he had a lot of hype around him as many fans wanted him to take out the dominant champ at the time, Phil Heath. Kai was never able to defeat Phil, at least in the judges' eyes, but he still left an impressive legacy. He was runner-up at the Olympia 3 times, he's a 3-time Arnold Classic champion, and he is renowned for his posing routines, which have yet to be replicated. Now, Kevin Levrone, he's gained immense popularity even recently. The TikTok community just loves this guy. He's taken gym talk by storm. Kevin has placed runner-up a whopping 4 times at the Mr. Olympia. He's actually only beaten in that record by Jay Cutler, who has had 6 runner-up finishes. And Kevin is also an Arnold Classic champion himself, having won the competition twice. So these guys are decorated veterans of the sport, and they're both fan favorites. But who was a better bodybuilder? Well, that's exactly my question in today's video. So let's get into it. Now, in terms of the versions I used, I did a lot of thinking. These guys had great careers, so there were a lot of options to choose from. For Kai, I went with the 2012 Mr. Olympia. I feel that 2012 is going to be a popular option. This was before Kai's gut really started getting big. He had much better aesthetics this year, and he was late enough into his career that he still had a good amount of mass too. I don't think it's his most massive version, but it wasn't worth choosing another bigger version over a more streamlined version. And 2012 was one of those years where he placed runner-up behind Phil, so competitively this was one of his better years too. And I just grabbed his photos from either Muscular Development or the NPC News Online website. Now for Kevin, I had a couple of great options too, but the main problem I ran into was tracking these photos down. Trying to find high quality photos from the 90s is very time consuming, and sometimes it's almost impossible to find all the poses. So what I did was I picked a couple of years and contests loosely, and then I began to look for photos with these contests in mind. And the best version with the most pics available ended up being the 1995 Olympia version. I wanted to use that 1997 Finland Grand Prix really bad, but I couldn't just find good photos. But I still think we're in the ballpark of Kevin's best version. I would say his best time period was from 94 to 99. After that, his legs and back got smaller, and I think all of his best physiques are found within this period of time. And honestly, when you're dealing with photos from the 90s, having higher quality photos is going to help Kevin more than just running with his best physique, even though it has worse quality photos. I do still think 1995 is in the running for the title of Kevin's best physique though. But anyway, those are the competitors today, and those are the versions that are going to be used in this comparison. Remember, if you guys like these types of videos, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe for more. Starting with the front double, I did find a photo of Kevin, and it's very high quality considering it's 30 years old and probably taken out of a magazine. But it wasn't black and white, so I decided to include a poorer quality photo, but one that was in color. But I really don't think this helps or hurts Kevin because I have Kai winning this one pretty easily. I have to be honest, I never thought this was Kevin's best shot. I really can't put my finger on why either. I would like to see maybe a better, more exaggerated X-frame, but it's not like it's bad. But it's not like he's bad. He has great quads and they sweep out a good amount, at least this year, and they're very separated. And his waist is tight, and his lats have okay flare. But I think he's just middling enough in all these areas to have a just okay X-frame. He's got a good balance, but his silhouette doesn't wow me. And then for the arms, I don't really find a problem. They're definitely not the reason I don't like him in this pose. They're full, they're thick, they may not peak a lot, but some people actually prefer this look over short biceps like Kai's, for example. But speaking of Kai, let's talk about why he wins. He looks like a comic book character. The X-frame is absolutely insane. His quads are better than Kevin's in every metric. Sweep, detail, overall size, everything. Kai was known for having some of the craziest legs ever, and we can begin to see why here, and we'll definitely see more proof of that very soon. Now going up, Kai does have a wider waist, but let's hold off on talking about that for now. Go slightly up. The lat flare is absolutely amazing. The taper is immaculate. They insert very low, but not too low. And then his wingspan, arm to arm, is just nuts. So when you combine all of this, you have the big sweeping quads on the bottom, and the huge lats tapering down neatly into his waist. This equals the illusion of a small waist. It's not smaller than Kevin's, I'm not saying that. But because of Kai's proportions, it appears smaller. Kai literally looks like the letter X. Now his abs do leave a little to be desired. That's really the only flaw in this pose though. I mean, maybe if you nitpick, you can add the forearms into the flaw list as well, but really that's it. I wouldn't categorize his midsection as a bubble gut, at least here. Kai is doing a good job of holding it in, but there's a slight amount of roundness there, and his abs can get blurry in some areas. But I do not think this ruins his pose for him. His proportions still make that waist look extremely small, and again, it's not a bubble gut. And Kai wins everywhere else too to outweigh this. He won the X-frame, he won the lats, the legs, and add the arms in there too. Those bicep peaks are absolutely insane, and he's a little bit harder and drier in the arms compared to Kevin. Now some people still may put Kevin ahead here simply because they don't like Kai's short biceps. They'd rather see a longer, thicker set of bis. For me, sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. I think objectively Kai is great regardless of what you prefer. I think he wins this area because of those insane peaks personally. So with Kai winning just about every single body part, including the arms, and having that crazy X-frame, he starts this competition out winning the first pose. pose. Kevin's pose is not bad at all. I don't know if either guy actually has a bad pose, but it's just too average for me against Kai's comic book villain look. The front lat spread is a lot better of a pose for Kevin, but Kai again mounts an impossible challenge with his crazy proportions. Kevin does have good proportions himself. His X-frame in the front double was mid to me, but now he has a much better outline. The legs are yet again solid like they were in the last pose. He's got some good sweep on them and the separation is very deep and clean. Going up, his waist does now appear tighter. This isn't because his body changed from pose to pose, but now his lats get to play a key role in his physique, which does make his waist look smaller. His lats in the last pose weren't impressing me at all, but here I definitely can't say that. They're pretty wide. In fact, his shoulder to shoulder width is pretty good as a whole, and he has good taper on the lats too. And then going up one last time, Kevin is of course phenomenal through the chest and shoulders. We know how good that region is for him. We can see a little of that here. The chest is thick, it doesn't flatten out one bit, and there are some striations in there if you look closely. The quality of the photo isn't doing him justice in this area. And the delts are the same, thick, popping, detailed. Kevin's arms are also looking really good here. The full triceps on the outside of the arm and the long inserting biceps on the inside of his arm give his arms a nice full look along with the delts. This is a great pose for Kevin. I really can't say anything bad about him. He's not just average like he was in the last one, this is more than a solid pose. But Kai is winning this pose too for basically similar reasons as to why he won the first one. The main reason is the more exaggerated proportions. Kevin has good lats, shoulder width, quad sweep, all the makings of a good X-frame. But Kai doesn't even look real when creating his X-frame. Starting with Kai's lower body, his quads look absolutely enormous. I honestly could believe this pic was photoshopped if I didn't take it directly from the NPC News Online website. I knew Kai had freaky legs, I said that in the first pose. This is one of his most well-known body parts, but this is absolutely insane. The only area Kevin can measure up in regards to the legs is separation. And even then, I just call it even. Kai is pretty separated himself. But in terms of the quad sweep and definitely overall mass, Kai's legs eat Kevin's. Now shifting our attention to Kai's midsection, there are now zero flaws to be found. Between his lats and quads, his waist actually appears smaller than Kevin's by quite a bit. And we know that's not true, obviously, but when Kai is sitting on those massive legs and is so wide up top, he again creates the illusion of an extremely tight waist. And now the abs are more locked in too, unlike in the front double. There's absolutely no problems with blurriness or anything like that. Now speaking of the lats, Kai's got Kevin beat there too. They extend a bit further out and they insert a touch lower on Kai's torso. And in terms of the shoulder to shoulder width, I actually think Kai may be wider. At minimum, he's roughly the same width as Kevin, which is incredible considering Kai is 3 to 4 inches shorter than Kevin. The only areas I'd give to Kevin as a whole on the physique are the arms and shoulders. I think that's pretty obvious, but also fairly unimportant compared to other factors that Kai already won. And I'd give a small win to Kevin in the pecs for the added thickness, but again, this win and the win in the arms and the delts, they don't account for much. It certainly doesn't make up the ground from Kai winning the lats, the legs, and maybe the shoulder width. And of course, Kai won the overall X-frame and silhouette. There's absolutely no way Kevin can overcome those freaky proportions. I thought Kai looked like an actual letter X in the first pose, but this one takes the cake. Kevin is really good in this pose though, much better than he was in the first one. This is a textbook front lat spread. But Kai is out of this world, maybe even literally with those alien genetics. Kai may have had great front poses, but Kevin now has one of his best shots here in the side chest. Kevin was known for that chest and those shoulders, so he should be better equipped to fend Kai off in this one and finally win a pose. So does Kevin seal the deal on this one? Well, let's see. Starting in the lower body, I can honestly go either way. I was preferring Kevin because I think he's a bit bigger than Kai from this angle, which I didn't expect. He's at least close with better balance though. I like Kevin's glutes more since they're less developed. I could go with Kai though just based on a little more detail. So between a little bit more mass or maybe a little bit better balance and more detail, I can just call it about even. Now let's move up a little bit to the midsections. Sometimes I don't even talk about the midsections in this pose because a lot of the times there's nothing of note going on here. That's the case for Kevin, but it's not the case for Kai, and that's certainly not a good thing. He has lost all regard for what his stomach looks like in this pose. He isn't even trying to hold it in. Not a good look. Kevin wins this area by default. Now let's go up to the all-important pecs. I think Kai is alright, but he's not Kevin Levrone in the pecs. Kevin is living up to the legacy and has much thicker pecs. Kai's are too flat to compete with Kevin's. I think we all could have seen that Kevin was going to win the pecs. And also in predictable fashion, I think Kevin scores a couple of victories in the arm and also in the delt. Kevin is just bigger in the delt, and although I did prefer Kai's arms in the front double, I don't like them here. From the front double with a head-on view, those peaks won me over. But in the side chest, I always gravitate to wanting longer inserting, thicker biceps, and a thicker tricep to back that up. That's Kevin all day long. Kai is flexing his tricep, and that kind of looks cool, and some people may like that the biceps peak even in this pose. It does look pretty neat, but for the side chest, this pose is all about big pecs and thickness from the side, and I want that thickness in the arms too. After winning the pecs, the delt, the arm, and not having a bubble gut, I gotta go with Kevin on this one, breaking Kai's winning streak. Kevin may have gotten a win in that side chest, but Kai is really hoping to start another winning streak here with the back poses. Kevin, not really known for the back. Kai, known for the back and legs. Now my expectations were quite low heading into this one for Kevin, but I was pleasantly surprised. I thought Kevin's back was just going to be devoid of any thickness or detail. And sure, I wish there was more thickness, but in terms of detail, I think he does more than alright. Especially in the black and white picture, which may be cheating, so I was sure to include a color picture as well, even though it's of worse quality. Anyway, in that black and white photo, he's definitely separated in the back. All those upper back muscles are clearly defined, and down to the lower back he keeps the same level of separation, and we can see exactly where his lats insert. Now because of the lack of density, it's not the best Christmas tree, but it's more than what we get nowadays if you ask me. So Kevin really exceeded my expectations in the back. I think he's plenty defined there, maybe a little too arm and delt dominant, but I was expecting a lot worse. But this is still a comparison that includes Kai Greene, and like I said, he's known for the back. This is why he was able to be the only one close to Phil Heath. If he didn't have that crazy back, he wouldn't have even stood a chance. When we look at Kai's back, yeah, it's just crazy. Super wide for one, not super important in this pose, but it does help. And the insertions on those lats are crazy, almost down to his glutes. Now even though he may not have the deepest separation, you can just see another level of thickness in Kai's back. Those thick and meaty lats are just hanging off his back. The only area of this back that Kevin can stand up to is the traps. And that's because Kai's were notoriously weak, and Kevin's are honestly pretty good. But come on now, that's one area. And through the arms and shoulders, even though Kevin was good there, I also have Kai winning. He wins the arms clearly for the bicep peaks. I think it's a very neat touch on this pose. And in the delts, Kevin may have a little more size, but I think Kai is a little more separated here, which makes me lean towards him. Then going all the way down to the lower body, Kai cleans up easily. Part of the reason I was going into this pose with low expectations for Kevin was because of his conditioning. Even at some of his best shows, he almost never really nailed it. And I thought this was going to hinder him in the back, but I was wrong. But in the lower body, that lack of conditioning does come back to bite him. In the lower body, Kai can win on conditioning alone. His hams are peeled, he looks like an anatomy chart, and the glutes showcase some faint but more plentiful striations compared to Kevin's. Even Kai's calf has thinner skin on it. But in terms of actual development, Kai's hamstrings are just too much for Kevin, even if Kevin did have better conditioning. Kai also wins in the quad sweep from the rear, he also wins in the adductors on the inner thighs, and his hamstrings are just so thick and gnarly looking. Kai wins the lower body easily, and the back too, probably just as easily. This is Kai Greene after all. It is what he's known for, so he snags another pose. The rear lat spread surprisingly is a lot more competitive. I had Kai in the bag for this one before I took a look at it, but Kevin really makes a case for himself. Does Kevin have the width? No, that's still Kai's, and I'm actually giving Kai the lats as a whole as well. They still insert very low, they're very full, and again, they're just hanging off of Kai's back, so Kai wins the main components, width and the lats, but what else? Honestly, that's it for the outright wins for Kai in this pose. The lower body isn't even as convincing as it was in the last pose. I still think Kai wins here, he's just as good as he was in the rear double, but now Kevin is a whole lot better. His hams look a lot more impressive both in size and conditioning, and his glutes look more conditioned as well. So yes, Kai wins, but Kevin is now far from bad here. He's actually really good. Now in the back, Kai already won the lats and the width, but I would give Kevin 2 areas. Now these areas aren't as important as the lats and the width, but they're good wins to have. Kevin is thicker for one. Not in the lats, but those erectors and the traps. Kai doesn't really have that much thickness. He didn't even have too much thickness anywhere besides the lats in the last back pose. The columns along Kevin's spine are just 2 huge ridges, and he has a little bit more happening in the lower back as well. And the second win that I'd give Kevin is for the taper. I like his more pronounced V taper. Kai is wider, but he's a little bit wider in the waist too structurally, and that just hurts his taper a little bit. Kevin's taper is much more aesthetic. And also, this isn't super important, but Kevin's triceps, even in this pose, the rear lat spread of all poses, are absolutely insane. I just had to say something about that, but I don't think many people are going to miss them. Anyway, those are 2 of Kevin's main wins, the taper and the thickness. And sure, he does look better now in the lower body, but I still think Kai pulls this one off. He still wins in the lower body, and after all, in the pose called the rear lat spread, Kai does win the most important areas, being the lats and the width. I think this is a somewhat easy pose for Kai to win, but I was not expecting Kevin to be nearly this good. Whether you had Kai or Kevin in the last pose, I think we can all agree that this one, the side triceps pose, is going to Kevin all day long. Like in the side chest, this is one of Kevin's strongest poses, and for similar reasons. He was just so dominant in that chest and shoulders region, and he can add the triceps to that list of big wins. Kevin's tricep is so massive, and since Kai's is notoriously skinny, Kevin's tricep is honestly 3 times the thickness of Kai's. And the same goes for all those other muscles I mentioned. Kevin wins in the triceps easily, he also wins the delt easily too. He's more striated and just more massive here, and Kevin wins the pecs pecs again as well, because Kai's, like in the side chest, they just flatten out and don't have any life to them. Just by winning those areas, Kevin already won the pose, but he wins more too. Since he's more massive and fuller in the delts and chest, he looks a lot thicker as a whole from the side, which is a key component in a good side pose. And then in the midsection, that's just icing on the cake. I'm pretty sure I don't need to tell you that Kai's midsection is not cutting it. He's not letting it hang out like in the side chest, but still. There's no separation in the abs or the obliques, and he can't hide the fact that his waist is just very wide. Kevin is streamlined and peeled, no issues there, and it's a big bonus on top of the rest of the pose. And then in the side leg, at least what we can see, I'm still going to go with Kai slightly, but it doesn't matter. And really, Kevin is far from bad here. He looks better than he did in the side chest actually. He looks to be bringing in sharper detail in this photo. So honestly, even though I'm going with Kai in the lower body, you can even have Kevin winning this area. And that would give him a clean sweep of every area on the pose. But like I said, Kevin did so much winning in the upper body and is more than close enough downstairs for it to even matter. I think the side try is an even stronger victory for Kevin than the side chest was. He wins this one easily. I think a lot of guys would immediately write Kai off in the abs and thighs, and you'd be fairly correct to do so. He does have good elements, but one major flaw. In terms of each guy's quads, I prefer Kai's quads pretty easily. Kevin is good, he's got size, sweep, and still has good separation, but he doesn't have Kai's level of development or shreds. The feathering in Kai's close quad is killer. In the abs themselves, strictly the abs, I think both guys are okay. I do prefer Kevin's because of the serratus and the oblique details, but Kai's abs, again just the abs, they're alright. I'd like to see a touch more separation, but they're alright as is. I like the blockiness, it does almost border on too much, but having good blockiness to the abs is something I'm a-okay with. Unfortunately for Kai, his abs happen to be on his torso and on his midsection. And I'm sorry Kai, but it hurts that pose enough for me to give Kevin the win on this one automatically. This is not a Kevin win as much as it is a Kai loss though. Is Kevin good in the quads? You bet. Is he even winning the abs? Yeah. But Kai has good elements too, but his big waist is just ending any of his chances. He looks a little distended, which is probably why he didn't have as much separation as I wanted, and then the obliques spill over, and even though he's wide in the lats, the waist derails any taper he might have built with those lats. This one is just too unsightly for me. Kai has good elements on their own, his sum of parts may even beat Kevin's, but when you finally add them all up and then add in the lack of taper in the big stomach, that puts him far behind Kevin. Ending things with the most muscular is slightly anticlimactic. Kevin's best pose is the most muscular, and even though Kai's poses aren't bad, they're just not Kevin's. I actually really like both of Kai's poses, but I do think the crab is a little better since his flatter chest and thicker waist aren't fully on display. And even there, he doesn't have the pop or fullness in the key areas like Kevin does. Kevin's arms are supremely thick, he wins that area hands down. Kai's peaks hurt him yet again, as well as those skinny triceps. Between those two things, he just doesn't have the thickness on either side of the arm that Kevin does. The bicep peaks look cool in the crab, but I want thickness in this pose like in the side chest. Kevin also wins the delts. I've said that many times now. Kevin's delts are some of the best of all time, and they're just two cannonballs atop those insanely thick arms. Kai, by comparison, is very flat in this area. His delts don't have the pop or the 3D look of Kevin's. Now in the chest, the centerpiece of the pose, it changes depending on what version you're looking at. In Kai's left version, Kevin wins all day. Kai's pecs just flatten out way too much. Now in Kai's crab version, I think he evens it up. Kevin is very full and has a good amount of striations in there, but Kai can get close based on detail. Kai's not as massive as Kevin in the pecs, even in the crab, but he's got that chest split going on and his striations are deeper. But this is still not enough to beat Kevin, but I'll at least say Kai can maybe tie him. Maybe. In the midsections, it's the same story as last time. Kevin's abs even look better in this pose. They have a little more blockiness to them and separation. And Kai's abs look a little bit more defined too, but he can't win in this area with that waist, even if he's downplaying it in the crab version. Finally, in the lower body, it's more or less the same here as in any of the other poses. Kevin's legs were great this year, I have to say. He's got the sweep and his detail is okay. This is an above average set of quads here. But Kai still does take the cake here with those freaky striations. And zooming back out, Kevin wins about every area except maybe the lower body. And even then, on another day, I can honestly have Kevin winning that area too. His physique was just built for this pose. He's got huge delts and the pecs and the thickness in the arms helps him a lot. And this year, his legs weren't that soft from the front and they definitely weren't undersized. I think we can all agree that this is one of the best, most musculars of all time. I think Kai's is good, but it's not quite at Kevin's level for how legendary he is in this pose. So to finish this, Kevin takes the last pose of the comparison. Well, on paper, this was actually a close comparison. This was as close as it could get, actually, since each guy won 4 poses. Kai won the first 2 front poses and the back poses. Kevin won both side shots, the abs and thighs, and the most muscular. So at least pose for pose, these guys are even. But that doesn't really tell the whole story. Mandatories are the majority of a matchup, but there are other factors at play. And those factors need to be discussed when there's a tie. So before I break the tie and inevitably end up hurting some fan base's feelings, let's get your guys' opinions first. I asked you guys first before the video who would win at their best. tests, and the vast majority of participants in this poll had Kevin winning. I do think the numbers are a bit influenced by the current wave of popularity that Kevin is riding right now, especially on TikTok, but regardless, Kevin was your guys' winner. But is he mine? Well, I want to get back into breaking this tie, so first we're going to consider the physiques as a whole. The mandatories are really focused on portions of the body, and on paper the most well-rounded guy should win the most poses, but sometimes it doesn't work that way. But that's what we want, the best bodybuilder, the most well-rounded physique. So let's do an overall physique assessment considering 3 factors, and these factors are shape/aesthetics, then conditioning, and then muscularity/size. These are the 3 main components in bodybuilding judging, so when we zoom out, who wins what? Well, I think Kai gets an easy win in conditioning. This is one of Kevin's better years, but I still don't think he has the conditioning, the thin skin, and so on of Kai. Kai was dry and he had tons of those little details from a great lower back Christmas tree to great quad feathering, but when we move to aesthetics, I think it is a win for Kevin. But I don't think Kai was so bad in certain poses. He did let his stomach go in one pose, and sure, it's not super trim, but he held it together in the front double, and it was actually a strong point in the front lat. So Kevin wins, but Kai was not as unaesthetic as some people may have thought, at least with the version we use today. Now, in terms of muscularity, a couple of things go into this. Muscularity pound for pound, overall size, and then completeness. I would give Kai probably all of these. He's shorter than Kevin, but still looked massive next to him, so you have to give him the pound for pound muscularity. And then in overall size, I do think Kai has the advantage. I think he has built more muscle overall than Kevin, for better or for worse. And in completeness, Kai wins there too. I can't really think of any body part on Kai that was missing or too bad. I mean, you can beat my door down and tell me about Kai's forearms and traps, but I would say that's completely irrational, and also you broke my door down. Kai's lack of forearms and traps, they just don't matter as much, simple as that. And honestly, Kai's slight forearms are only really visible in the front double. I thought they looked a-okay in the rear double, so they hardly play a role even if you cared. Now the traps make a little more sense, but still they didn't detract from his win in the rear double. Everything else was so huge and the traps are still defined enough to where it didn't matter. Now for Kevin, I would say he's pretty complete too. I thought I see more gaps in his physique, but at least with the 95 version, his legs, both quads and hams were still intact shape and size wise. The only thing I think Kevin is missing is a little back. I think it's good, but it's enough to add to the list of underdeveloped body parts. The rear lat spread was fine, but the lack of thickness in the rear double was a little too obvious and too major for me not to include it on this imaginary list. Some of you may disagree, but that's okay because Kai wins anyway. He won the other 2 aspects in the muscularity department, so even if he lost in terms of completeness, which he doesn't, he ties at worst, he'd still win the overall component of muscularity. And since Kai wins conditioning and muscularity and Kevin only wins shape, I have to give Kai this round. I'm sure some of you are going to say aesthetics should count for more or something along those lines, but come on. Kevin won in that area, sure, but Kai was no slouch. Kai won both of his categories clearly and is close enough to Kevin that even if aesthetics were weighed more, Kai would still come out on top. But I have one more round to consider, and that is just the flaws. Now this is slightly different from completeness. Just because you lack something doesn't necessarily make it a flaw. This category is more reserved for worse things like glaring weaknesses, injuries, or very unaesthetic, unappealing attributes. I would say the only thing that makes this shortlist between either competitor is Kai's waist. It wasn't as big of a problem as some people might remember. He still kept it under control for the vast majority of the comparison, but there's just no way a normal person wouldn't notice that. So I'm not saying it's like a Dorian torn bicep or Phil Heath midsection even, but I think it can be an issue enough for some that it barely gets on this list. So in terms of flaws, Kevin wins this round by not having any. And wouldn't you know, we've expanded this verdict to now include 3 metrics to look at, and it's still a tie. Kai won the overall physique category, Kevin won the flaw/lack of flaws portion, and we know they tied in the mandatory round. So I just have to rip the band-aid off. I have Kai winning this one. Was this still closer than I expected? Yeah, I was thinking that Kevin didn't stand a chance, but I think the better aesthetics did a lot of work for him. But I think Kai, especially if these two were on stage, would be the winner. He's more complete, more muscular, had better overall conditioning, and I thought his poses were clearer wins for him. Kevin did capitalize on Kai's big stomach in a pose or two, but like I said earlier, Kai's stomach was not that big of a flaw to influence every one of the poses, especially in this 2012 version. It hurt him in one shot especially, and in another kind of, but this is open bodybuilding. This isn't a small waist contest. Kevin may have slightly better overall aesthetics, but Kai had crazy proportions, a wild X-frame, and his midsection was far from a 2018 Phil Heath, for example. So I do think Kai was the better bodybuilder, and today he is the winner of this comparison. Well, that is going to do it for me in today's video. I know a lot of you guys, especially those that came from TikTok, are going to disagree with this one, so go ahead and leave me a comment. Let me know who you had winning this one and why. By the way, if you guys are looking for any high quality supplements, be sure to head over to armsracenutrition.com. Whatever you purchase there, be sure to use my code PROJECT10 at checkout for 10% off your entire order. That's code PROJECT10 at armsracenutrition.com. Finally, if you guys like this video and want to see more, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe for more. With all that said, I'm going to thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.
queden like sea, yeah.